Welcome to Chasing Impact, Not Sales, where heart meets hustle, strategy meets service, and selling feels good again. I'm your host, Mandy Minatello. Let's go. Hey, welcome back. We're going to jump right in today, and I'm really going to talk sales, right? Because I came across recently a statistic that at first I was like, really? And then as a sales specialist, I was like, really? And so today we're going to talk about pitch to partnership. And really, it's the importance of the role as a sales representative. So we'll start with a statistic because I thought it was super interesting and I think you will too. So it was an online study. It wasn't product specific or company specific. It was just a cross section of America asking satisfied customers. So yes, I will give it that we started with satisfied customers, but that doesn't affect the stats. So let's go. So satisfied customers, of those, 70% rooted their level of satisfaction back to the sales process. Whoa, right? They weren't saying it was something about the product or the service itself. That is obviously part of it. But they rooted it back to the sales process. Think about that a minute. This is where there's a disconnect so often in the industry because we try to separate the sales from the service. And that is simply not the case because the sale, as I've said, is not the closing. The sale is not that transaction. The sale is not the moment that the customer, the client, puts their credit card in. The sale is a process. Why we call it the sales process and not the sales transaction, right? The sales process starts with the first introduction, that first touch that the sales team has with the potential client and continues beyond that transaction into, for the case of this particular statistic, what they were talking about, it goes through the first 24 hours of their interaction with that company or using that product. This is why it is so important to understand the process. This is why it's so important for the mindset and the strategy and the psychology to be ingrained in a true sales rock star. This is why so often I will refer to those rock star sales reps as brand ambassadors or concierges. Because when you think about those terms in the general definition, if you think about someone who is a brand ambassador or someone who is a concierge, that definition, by definition, they understand the value of a first impression. They understand that you cannot go back and redo a first impression. That first impression is a lasting impression. And in this case, that first impression, that first interaction with the sales rep to the potential client is what is going to create that lifetime partnership, that client satisfaction. And the point of all of this is because so often I see companies that really keep their departments separated. So we've got the sales team working in an absolute silo, in a vacuum, from the customer service team, from the operations, and from sometimes even marketing, although marketing and sales sometimes will work together. Now, hear me out because I absolutely 100% will stand on the soapbox and scream from the rooftops that scope creep will ruin your business. If you've got people who are trying to do things that are outside of their realm of expertise, that can crumble a business. So I'm not saying that multiple people do multiple jobs. I'm saying that if you have the right people in the right seats and they're focusing on their zone of genius in those seats, then they have the opportunity to stay in their swim lane and absolutely kill it. Now, when you line those swim lanes up, like I'm envisioning the Olympics here, you got Michael Phelps next to, I don't even know any of the other names because I'm not a big swimmer, but if you've got them all lined up and everyone is doing their best, maybe I should use NASCAR because I know a little bit more about that. They're able to utilize each other's drafts, right? And they're going to get in the draft, and teams can work together for the betterment, even though they're in their own car winning their own race, right? And that not working in a silo, but working in a swim lane is what's going to propel companies forward, crushing quotas and killing goals. But it starts with the first impression and carries all the way through. For this reason, it is super important to have systems, processes, transparency, all of that. Everyone should know what each other is responsible for. There is absolute freedom in company transparency, in knowing what everyone's individual goal is, not to take over that goal, but to be able to work for the betterment of the company as a whole so that everyone knows and trusts that their progress, their goal attainment is taken care of. That handoff, that the customer is in a great set of hands because you know, like, and trust your team, same as you want the client to know, like, and trust the company. It's so important to take that same, if you want to call it client satisfaction, those same definitions, those same guidelines, those same goals that you're striving for when you're achieving that satisfaction rate also applies internally to your team. Is everyone in your team working together? Not scope creep, but working together within their zones of genius for the betterment of the company. And then is that transferring over to where the clients feel that they are taken care of at every level? When I come in and work with a company and I do their initial audit, taking a look at it, of course, I am keeping my eyes specifically on their conversion strategy, their sales team, all the KPIs and things. But what I also am looking at is, does the sales team work in tandem with operations and customer service? Do they know what happens? When I ask a sales team member, okay, tell me the customer journey, I expect that they're going to know the customer journey beyond closing. What happens? What's that next call? What is the onboarding process? What happens after the onboarding process? And what's the next step after they complete the initial contracted service? Or they use the initial product? What is the next step thing for them? Because companies should always have a complete customer life cycle plan so that that initial sale isn't the only sale. That initial pitch, right? If we're talking in sales terms, that initial pitch, that initial value add, that initial time that you're saying, here's the opportunity that we have for you, is not the end. That's just the beginning. And then they come in and they love the experience. They need that next steps thing. So, sales team, you're the first impression. You're also the lasting impression. You're the one they're going to go back to if they have a bad experience within the first 24, 48 hours, because you're the only one they know at that point. So you could have the very best customer service team there is, but if they're not working in tandem with that first impression, with the brand ambassador, with the concierge, then it doesn't even matter. And this is where I think people forget the importance, because if my title is customer service, then my title is customer service. If my title is sales, they think my title is closing. And that is not the case at all. Customer service is part of everyone's job. Customer service is not the end all be all. It is the underlying thread that ties all of it together. Sales, customer service itself, client services, operations, marketing, right? Customer service is that thread. And so you need to understand that. And sales teams need to understand that. But everybody needs to understand that I can be an absolute rock star closer and still be the worst thing that ever happened to a business if that experience is purely a transaction, and that is what the client, potential customer feels. They feel like a transaction, even if that person is able to get that transaction made, and then that's it. They say, all right, next. We've lost them, because that client, best case scenario, may fill, potentially fill their or their contract obligation. But then what? They don't want to stick around. You've got to create that relationship through the sales process to create the lifetime customer. And that is going to be the most ROI you can ever get, is when you have the cost associated with that lead that transfers into a lifetime experience with that satisfied client. Not only turns into potentially selling into other programs, selling other services, upgrading products. Also, you create a referral partner who can be the best network you've ever entered your company into. And it all starts with the relationship built by the sales process. So I say all this to call out those, my fellow salespeople, who tout your resumes that you can close anything. You can, quote unquote, sell snow to a snowman, ice to an Eskimo. That doesn't mean crap if you can't also have a relationship with the Eskimo. You got to be able to show the Eskimo the value of some ice, right? And why your ice is better than others, how you will always be there for them when they need more, because you understand what it's also like to need ice. That is what makes a salesperson a rock star. That is what creates that invaluable space that you are, that you provide for the company. That's what puts you at the table with the CEO, the COO, the CIO, the CTO, the CMO, all of that, because your value is the first impression that that customer, that client, that potential will ever have. And that makes you absolutely invaluable once you understand that. And you use your service heart, the true active service, when you understand the active service that that sale is beyond the transaction, and you actually show that you care, the sky is the limit. That's what makes sales so much fun for me. That's what makes sales so important to me. And that's what creates the difference between having a pipeline and having a partnership development. You got this. You're the first and foremost, and you're killing it. Let's go. Thanks for listening to Chasing Impact, Not Sales. If this episode sparked something, share it, subscribe, and remember, real sales come from real service. Keep chasing impact.